good. How are you?
I'm doing so good. This is Daniel from Next Best Picture. I'm so excited to talk to you about Saving Bikini Bottom. Thank you for your time this morning. You have been directing some of the best episodes of TV in recent years. You know, The Last of Us, What We Do in the Shadows, The Diplomat, and many, many more. Those feel quite a bit different than Saving Bikini Bottom. What led you to sign on for Saving Bikini Bottom?
That's true. It is a very different project, but I learned a lot from people who do television, and it made me know that I knew how to do this movie actually. I read the script during COVID, and it just was the best script I read during that time. And I read a lot because what's a girl gonna do besides read, and I just thought it was hilarious. And because of people that I know from television, I kind of, as a filmmaker, I began very interested in drama, and I felt that things that were a little darker were refreshing in the kind of, you know, commodity paradise that we're living in or whatever. I was like, oh, I feel really good when I see a sad French movie or whatever. And I thought this script was amazing. And I have had just so many compelling vaudeville lessons from people who work in television. Things that I learned from Barry Sonnenfeld really helped us figure out what would be something we can shoot with a lens that we could also draw in a way that somewhat looks integrated with the world of SpongeBob, because it's different. And things I learned working for him helped me figure out how to shoot this movie. When I worked on the show Silicon Valley, Mike Judge used to call it Alec Berg's comedy knowledge drops. But he would tell me something, and then I would go use it with an actor, and the actor would be like, "That's vaudeville, baby," and and everyone but me knew because they had done a lot of comedy, uh, and also on What We Do in the Shadows, I just really loved those people and their openness to everything, and their responsiveness to an ensemble that knows each other well is also something that is true in this franchise. The tone of SpongeBob is a world unto itself, and it's not like any of those other things, but there was knowledge from each of those things that I could use in this movie.
That's incredible. Yeah, the tone of SpongeBob is so unique, the absurdity of it in a sense. But this was also your first time stepping into an animated world. The movie's not entirely animated, but obviously huge portions of it are. What were the biggest learning curves for you in stepping into the world of animation?
Oh, it was very mutually, a lot of learning went on, because even though the other SpongeBob movies do have, like Antonio Banderas shows up as a short order cook, in those movies, the live action is usually more like a real Brechtian break with the rest of the world. And this script, when I received it, it was much more integrated. And so for all the sides of the live action and the animation, we just were really patient and spent a lot of time saying, this is the language we use to do this. And there were a lot of things that were really fascinating and surprising, like in animation, they kind of never stop writing. And they never stop trying to make it better. Like Piero always says, let's plus that, and in live action, which is a field that's more familiar to me, we don't plus. We just we do the best thing that we can when we're shooting, and then that's what it's going to be, because you can't plus it because you shot it, and so even when we first started storyboarding, I had to suggest that I start earlier than I was supposed to start, because Piero and I and the story team, we boarded every single shot together in a way that was going to integrate with the photography, and that also was, I think, accountable to his work, because it's not really fair if he draws every single character and makes up every single frame, and then I'm the director of the movie, so I thought it was really not only important for making this one coherent movie that we made, but also, just to be fair to him, I needed to contribute to that work. And so we just developed a common language and just kept talking, and over a period of time, we started to understand each other, and it turned out to be a very joyful experience for me to get to learn what you can do in animation that you can't do in live action. Like we shot the live action parts in Santa Fe. And I remember we got in the car to drive there and a helium truck passed us. And I had just been storyboarding for like 3 or 4 months. And in my mind, I thought it was going to lift into the air because that's what would happen if it was animated, and just like the idea that these kinds of fanciful physical comedies can happen are, it really was expansive for me, I guess.
That's so good. Yeah, I was going to ask about like a storyboarding process. So it sounds like you did extensive storyboards. I also wanted to know about the process of shooting the live action plates for animated sequences, especially for some of the more complicated like fight sequences. I'm thinking of when Sandy is fighting the rattlesnakes and then her family shows up. And that just seems so complex when you're blending the live action with the animation. What was your process to shooting a scene like that and making sure that you capture all the live action pieces that you need to make this make sense?
Well, first of all, I love that scene, so thank you for thinking of it. And it actually is not any harder than any other visual effects movie. I think it might have been probably more surprising to the animation team about the things we had to go through to achieve it, but we did it the same way you would do any VFX shot. So first we storyboarded it. And so together with these really excellent and seasoned animators, we knew what every single shot was. And then we went and shot the plate that goes behind that shot. And we did that for every single shot that you see. And it wasn't really that hard because we knew what all the shots were from the storyboard. So in that sense, it was, I would think, the same as if you do like a Star Wars movie or any other big VFX movie where you have to know what's going to happen in the frame. But once you know that, it's possible to execute it, and you can be like, okay, we have to have green here, but not here. And it's, once you can see it from the work that we did with the animators, it's just, it makes it very easy to execute because they've already said what all the frames are.
That's good. It's just kind of putting the pieces together at that point. That's great.
Yeah. And also, like another VFX movie, like I never made a Jurassic Park movie, but I'm assuming that if you do, you're like, oh, there's a raptor coming or whatever, and you have to say that to the actor because actually there's nothing for them to react to, right? And depending on what kind of actor you're working with, that can be very, very hard because some people really rely on reactivity for their craft. And we really lucked out with these actors because they were all really able to imagine, like, oh, I've got a squirrel in my shirt or whatever, but I would stand there and be like, okay, you got a squirrel in your shirt. She's going around the back. She's coming down. She's swinging at you on a rope. And the same way that I assume you would do if a velociraptor was coming at you.
That's good. Well, that's interesting. I read a quote from you from last year about where you talked about how you prefer to not over rehearse things with your actors and just making sure the cameras are on to sort of capture an authentic moment. And I was relating that to this movie and figuring that must be a lot more difficult in the context of a SpongeBob movie, a live action animation hybrid. How were you able to translate your directing style that you've honed over years into a very different film like this?
It actually isn't as hard as it sounds, like because it doesn't take any longer to set the shot up or do anything that makes the actor more exhausted. And so the same practices that you would do to keep it fresh in a live action movie are the same practices you would do here. And then in a way, I think it's easier because in a big ensemble piece like this, like 50 out of 53 characters are animated. And so you can't exhaust them or ruin their performance by taking too long or whatever, because you can always, because that was stuff that we made later with Piero.
Great. Well, obviously, SpongeBob is so legendary. It's been around for 25 plus years now. What was your relationship like to SpongeBob before jumping onto this film? Were you a newbie to the world or a diehard fan or somewhere in between?
I was, and I hope that actually contributes something to the film. And I had so much support from people who've worked on it for so long. Like Piero knows the world really well, and Vince and Mark and everyone who works for Nickelodeon knows the franchise in and out. Like the executives will be like, yeah, but he's very porous, and they all know things that, like, even visually, like how much he can expand and contract, or how his his holes should be surfaced, or what kind of surface Sandy should have, or, you know, when we've ever talked about her family before in the whole sweep of 25 years. And so I had a lot of support learning about everything I needed to know about Sandy, but I didn't know it before I read the script. So it's a very pure reading experience where I just was like, this is hilarious. And that was my experience. And I thought, I like things that are hilarious. It was a little bit of a dark time, not so much personally, but in the world, when we were all stuck in our houses and everyone was lonely. And I just thought, this is joyful. And I didn't grow up with it, which would be very surprising because of my youthful beauty, but I actually didn't grow up with it. And I didn't, I mean, it's impossible not to know about it because it's ubiquitous, and I live in the world and they have t-shirts and stuff, you know, but like, I didn't really know the world until I started working on it. The day I read the script, I was in a hotel and we were watching linear television, and SpongeBob came on, and I was like, well, maybe that's a sign, you know, and I think that it was helpful in terms of just keeping I think when you tell any story for 25 years, people have made a lot of efforts to kind of create freshness, you know, and so I think that what the writers did when they conceived of the Cheeks family, and what we did when we designed the Cheeks family, like there's a lot of elements that people haven't seen before, and then there's a lot that I think will be really familiar and pleasant and comforting.
SpongeBob has been around for so long and has been so influential for so many people, myself included. You know, I did grow up with it, and it shaped, for better or worse, shaped my sense of humor and a lot of other people that I grew up with. What are the shows or movies that helped shape your sense of humor growing up? The things that just kind of stuck in the back of your brain that you've held on for all these years?
The one that I thought about a lot that was very popular in my first TV viewing years was The Muppet Show. And there's a lot of common vaudeville elements of just, you know what I mean? Like something's happening in the foreground, but then Gonzo will fly by because he just got shot out of a cannon or whatever. And that really, I loved that show so much. I loved all those Muppets. I felt really passionate about it. I kind of, like, I have that book of where Miss Piggy is like a glamorous model, and she wears like Sophia Loren hats and stuff. And like I really identified with those characters, and although they're quite different as characters, the way that they occupy their stage is not the opposite of how we shot this film and how the film is drawn, you know, and definitely there's things that we changed and maybe freshened or just had to do because there's enough live action that it's not just Antonio Banderas in his truck, right? It's like you have to be able to both film the world with a lens and draw it. So there are things that are different, but I think I knew that tradition from the Muppet Show. And I mean, it's a much longer tradition than that, but that's where I knew it.
Well, Liza, I can't wait for more people to see Saving Bikini Bottom. Your work is great in it. I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much.